Hello, and welcome to this session of Scrum Master Certification course. Hello, and welcome to Scrum Master Certification course. I hope you're looking forward to learning a new concept through a fun activity. Today we will watch a Scrum team perform an exercise to gain insight into team velocity and the value of doing things in rapid iteration. Here's what the facilitator has to say to the team.
Okay, all right everybody, we're going to go ahead and start with an exercise. This is a kind of a quick little brain passing game that we do to just illustrate some of the concepts that we've been talking about in Scrum, mainly the value of doing things in rapid iteration, okay? So you guys are a perfect number for a Scrum team. So pretend you guys are all on the same team, and what we're going to do is just take these little brainies, okay? These are our little stress balls that we use in class. So I've got a bucket of these different brainies, and what I'd like you guys to do as a team is basically go ahead and pass these amongst yourself. Now there's just a couple rules that I'm going to tell you about. First rule is that each team member must have possession of each of these brainies, okay? And what you're trying to do is figure out how many of these you can pass between all of you within 2 minutes. Okay, now again, each person has to have possession of the brain at least once in the progression before it goes back in the bucket to be counted as complete for that one. Now the second rule, you need to pass the brain behind your back, okay, to the next person. All right, make sense? So, first thing I'm going to do is give you guys 30 seconds to plan how you're going to do it and come up with an estimate for how many of these things you think as a team you can pass in 2 minutes. Okay, your 30 seconds starts now.
The team quickly begins to plan a way to perform the task. It looks like some serious strategy planning is going on.
Time is up. I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock. You guys figure out how you're going to do this, okay? All right, so 2
At least you
minutes.
see his hand. That's it.
Ready? 2 minutes. Oh, how many did you guys guess you can do?
60.
Okay, that's the guess. Go ahead. Time starts now.
The target is 60 brains in 2 minutes. The team begins passing the brains. The last member in line counts the number of brains that make it to the container. Each team member is busy passing the brains. It seems that their arms are getting tired of the backward passing. 10 more seconds to go. The team is working hard. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and time's up.
Okay, so now that we've done this little exercise here, what did you guys think about it? I mean, did you learn anything in terms of the ability to pass these little brains around that you didn't anticipate?
Dropped more than I thought we would.
You dropped more than you thought you would. Okay.
Also, participants felt they had underestimated their passing capability. The target was 60 and the team achieved 73. The facilitator explains that this was a case of underestimating and overachieving. So the team is asked to play another round of brain passing to see if things can be done better, and if the estimation is more towards being accurate this time. At the end of the next round, here's what the team had to say.
We estimated 80, and then we did 79.
Right.
Right? So it means that it's going to be somewhere between those which will be an efficient team performance.
So that's good. You notice you're getting closer in terms of estimating what your actual velocity is, right, for the team. Okay, and also it takes into account things that you may not have anticipated earlier, right, like how many you might have dropped and things like that.
This activity demonstrates how initial estimates can change after a few iterations. We're going to learn the phase explained after plan and estimate in Scrum, implementation. To start with, large projects require multiple Scrum teams to work in sync to ensure project progress. Because the teams work in parallel, ensuring that all teams progress uniformity is critical with respect to deadlines. There has to be a communication mechanism to ensure that teams are in sync and any findings from one of the teams related to any part of the project is effectively communicated across teams. So what is implementation all about? The implement phase is related to the execution of the tasks and activities to create a project's product. These activities include creating various deliverables, conducting daily stand-up meetings, and grooming, which in turn include reviewing, fine-tuning, and regularly updating the product backlog at regular intervals. The Scrum body of knowledge says that the phase implement can be applied to portfolios, programs, and/or projects in any industry, products, services, or any other results to be delivered to stakeholders, and projects of any size or complexity. We need to throw more light on the overview of the implement phase process. Let's understand them one by one. The first process and sequence is create deliverables. In this process, the Scrum team works on the tasks in the sprint backlog to create sprint deliverables. A Scrum board is often used to track the work and activities being carried out. Issues and problems being faced by the Scrum team could be updated in an impediment log. Conduct daily stand-up is the second process followed. In this process, every day a highly focused, time-boxed meeting is conducted, referred to as the daily stand-up meeting. This is the forum for the Scrum team to update each other on their progress and any impediments they may be facing. The last process in the implementation phase is Groom Prioritized Product Backlog. In this process, the prioritized product backlog is continuously updated and maintained. A prioritized product backlog review meeting may be held in which any changes or updates to the backlog are discussed and incorporated into the prioritized product backlog as appropriate. Now that we have understood that there are three processes involved, let's learn them in detail now. We are starting with the process Create Deliverables. Here, we will be learning about the inputs, tools, and outputs involved in creating the deliverables. The first source of input is none other than the Scrum core team itself. It, as an input, consists of the Scrum team, the Scrum Master, and the product owner. Sprint Backlog as an input has the list of the tasks to be executed by the Scrum team in the upcoming sprint is called the Sprint Backlog. It is common practice that the Sprint Backlog is represented on a Scrum board or task board, which provides a constantly visible depiction of the status of the user stories in the backlog. Also included in the Sprint Backlog are any risks associated with the various tasks. Any mitigating activities to address the identified risks would also be included as tasks in the Sprint Backlog. Once the Sprint Backlog is finalized and committed to by the Scrum team, new user stories should not be added. However, tasks that might have been missed or overlooked from the committed user stories may need to be added. If new requirements arise during a sprint, they will be added to the overall prioritized product backlog and included in a future sprint. Scrum Board is the next input. Scrum's transparency comes from openly viewable information tools like the Scrum Board, which shows the progress of the team. The team uses a Scrum Board to plan and track progress during each sprint. As you can see in the diagram given, the Scrum Board contains 4 columns to indicate the progress of the estimated tasks for the sprint. A to-do column for tasks not yet started, an in-progress column for the tasks started but not yet completed, a testing column for tasks completed but in the process of being tested, and a done column for the tasks that have been completed and successfully tested. At the beginning of a sprint, all tasks for that sprint are placed in the to-do column and are subsequently moved forward according to their progress. Furthermore, the Scrum Board should preferably be maintained manually on paper or a whiteboard, but can also be maintained electronically in a spreadsheet. The Scrum team should change or add to the Scrum Board as required so that the Scrum Board provides visual information and control about the work going on as agreed and committed by the team. According to the impediment log, any impediment is any hindrance or hurdle that reduces the productivity of the Scrum team. Impediments must be identified, resolved, and removed if the team is to continue working effectively. Impediments can be internal to the team, such as inefficient workflow or lack of communication, or they can be external. Examples of external impediments might include software license issues or unnecessary documentation requirements. The Scrum framework, with its inherent transparency, facilitates the swift and easy identification of impediments. Failure to identify or deal with impediments can be very costly. Impediments should be formally recorded by the Scrum Master in an impediment log and can be discussed during daily stand-up meetings and sprint review meetings as appropriate. Now we're going to talk about the tools involved in this phase. Team expertise is the most sought-after tool in the implement phase. This refers to the collective expertise of the Scrum team members to understand the user stories and tasks in the sprint backlog in order to create the final deliverables. Team expertise is used to assess the inputs needed to execute the planned work of the project. This judgment and expertise are applied to all technical and management aspects of the project during the Create Deliverables process. Scrum team members have the authority and responsibility to determine the best means for converting the prioritized product backlog items into finished products without requiring involvement of any stakeholders outside the team. Additional expertise is available from the Scrum guidance body as required. We have seen the inputs and tools involved. Let's now see the outputs generated in the last leg of the process. Sprint deliverables is the first output. At the end of each sprint, a product increment or deliverable is completed. The deliverable should possess all features and functionality defined in the user stories included in the sprint and should have been tested successfully. Updated Scrum Board is another important output. The Scrum Board is updated regularly as the team keeps completing tasks. However, at the end of the sprint, the Scrum Board will be reset or wiped off and a new Scrum Board is created for the next sprint. We're going to learn about the Develop Epics process. In the last video, we saw the significance of implementation in Scrum projects. We also talked about the first process employed called Create Deliverables. Today, we're going to discuss the second process being performed as part of the implementation phase, Conduct Daily Stand-Up. But before that, let me give you a brief idea as to what the daily stand-up means. Conduct Daily Stand-Up is a process which is a highly focused, time-boxed meeting, is conducted every day. This meeting is referred to as a daily stand-up meeting, which is a forum for the Scrum team to update each other on their progress and any impediments they may be facing. There are a lot of inputs, tools, and outputs involved in this process. Why don't we look at them one by one? So the first input being used in this process is the Scrum team. The Scrum team, sometimes referred to as the development team, is a group or team of people who are responsible for understanding the business requirements specified by the product owner, estimating user stories, and final creation of the project deliverables. Scrum teams are cross-functional and self-organizing. The team decides the amount of work to commit to in a sprint and determines the best way to perform the work. The Scrum team consists of cross-functional team members who carry out all the work involved in creating potentially shippable deliverables, including development, testing, quality assurance, etc. Identifying the Scrum team is a responsibility of the product owner, often in consultation with the Scrum Master. Next is the Scrum Master as the second output. A Scrum Master is a facilitator and servant leader who ensures that the Scrum team is provided with an environment conducive to completing the project successfully. The Scrum Master guides, facilitates, and teaches Scrum practices to everyone involved in the project, clears impediments for the team, and ensures that Scrum processes are being followed. It is the responsibility of the product owner to identify the Scrum Master for a Scrum project. Next, the Sprint Burndown Chart. The Sprint Burndown Chart is a graph that depicts the amount of work remaining in the ongoing sprint. The initial Sprint Burndown Chart is accompanied by a planned burndown. The Sprint Burndown Chart should be updated at the end of each day as work is completed. This chart shows the progress that has been made by the Scrum team and also allows for the detection of estimates that may have been incorrect. If the Sprint Burndown Chart shows that the Scrum team is not on track to finish the tasks in the sprint on time, the Scrum Master should identify any obstacles or impediments to successful completion and try to remove them. A related chart is a Sprint Burn-Up Chart. Unlike the Sprint Burn-Down Chart, which shows the amount of work remaining, the Sprint Burn-Up Chart depicts the work completed as part of the sprint. The impediment log is another source for input. An impediment is any hindrance or hurdle that reduces the productivity of the Scrum team. Impediments must be identified, resolved, and removed if the team is to continue working effectively. Impediments can be internal to the team, such as inefficient workflow or lack of communication, or they can be external. Examples of external impediments might include software license issues or unnecessary documentation requirements. The Scrum framework, with its inherent transparency, facilitates the swift and easy identification of impediments. Failure to identify or deal with impediments can be very costly. Impediments should be formally recorded by the Scrum Master in an impediment log and can be discussed during daily stand-up meetings and sprint review meetings as appropriate. So to make these happen, we certainly need some tools, and the tools in action are as follows. The daily stand-up meeting is the first tool we're going to start with. The daily stand-up meeting is a short daily meeting, time-boxed to 15 minutes. Team members assemble to report their progress in the sprint and plan the day's activities. The meeting duration is very short and all members of the Scrum team are expected to attend. However, the meeting is not canceled or delayed if one or more members are not able to attend. Discussions between the Scrum Master and the team or between some Scrum team members are encouraged, but discussions happen after the meeting to ensure that the daily stand-up meeting is short. 3 daily questions is the next tool being used. In the daily stand-up meeting facilitated by the Scrum Master, each Scrum team member provides information in the form of answers to 3 specific questions. The questions are as follows. What did I complete yesterday? What will I complete today? What impediments or obstacles, if any, am I currently facing? By focusing on these 3 questions, the entire team can have a clear understanding of the work status. Occasionally, other items may be discussed, but this is kept to a minimum in light of the time-box nature of the meeting. Now that we've seen the inputs and tools used in the process of conducting daily stand-up meeting, it is time to check the outputs. The first output we're going to discuss is the updated sprint burndown chart. The sprint burndown chart is a graph that depicts the amount of work remaining in the ongoing sprint. The initial sprint burndown chart is accompanied by a planned burndown. The sprint burndown chart should be updated at the end of each day as work is completed. This chart shows the progress that has been made by the Scrum team and also allows for the detection of estimates that may have been incorrect. If the sprint burndown chart shows that the Scrum team is not on track to finish the tasks in the sprint on time, the Scrum Master should identify any obstacles or impediments to successful completion and try to remove them. A related chart is a sprint burn-up chart. Unlike the sprint burn-down chart, which shows the amount of work remaining, the sprint burn-up chart depicts the work completed as part of the next sprint. Next output is the updated impediment log. An impediment is any hindrance or hurdle that reduces the productivity of the Scrum team. Impediments must be identified, resolved, and removed if the team is to continue working effectively. Impediments can be internal to the team, such as inefficient workflow or lack of communication, or they can be external. Examples of external impediments might include software license issues or unnecessary documentation requirements. The Scrum framework, with its inherent transparency, facilitates the swift and easy identification of impediments. Failure to identify or deal with impediments can be very costly. Impediments should be formally recorded by the Scrum Master in an impediment log and can be discussed during daily stand-up meetings and sprint review meetings as appropriate. We're going to discuss the third process called Groom Prioritized Product Backlog. Let's first see the inputs involved. Scrum Core Team is the first source of input. One of the outputs of this process is the identification of the product owner. The product owner is the person responsible for achieving maximum business value for the project. He or she is also responsible for articulating customer requirements and maintaining business justification for the project. The product owner represents the voice of the customer. Each Scrum team will have a designated product owner. A small project may have only one product owner, whereas larger projects may have several. These product owners are responsible for managing their sections of the prioritized product backlog. Product owners write the user stories and manage and groom the prioritized product backlog. A Scrum Master is a facilitator and servant leader who ensures that the Scrum team is provided with an environment conducive to completing the project successfully. The Scrum Master guides, facilitates, and teaches Scrum practices to everyone involved in the project, clears impediments for the team, and ensures that the Scrum processes are being followed. It is the responsibility of the product owner to identify the Scrum Master for a Scrum project. The Scrum team, sometimes referred to as the development team, is a group or team of people who are responsible for understanding the business requirements specified by the product owner, estimating user stories, and final creation of the project deliverables. Scrum teams are cross-functional and self-organizing. The team decides the amount of work to commit to in a sprint and determines the best way to perform the work. The Scrum team consists of cross-functional team members who carry out all the work involved in creating potentially shippable deliverables, including development, testing, quality assurance, etc. Identifying the Scrum team is the responsibility of the product owner, often in consultation with the Scrum Master. Prioritized product backlog is the next source of input we're going to discuss. The product owner develops a prioritized product backlog, which contains a prioritized list of business and project requirements written in the form of epics, which are high-level user stories. The prioritized product backlog is based on three primary factors: value, risk or uncertainty, and dependencies. It is also referred to as the risk-adjusted product backlog, since it includes identified and assessed risks related to the project. It also encompasses all approved changes that can be approximately prioritized in the prioritized product backlog. Let's now learn the primary factors influencing the prioritized product backlog, one by one. Let's talk about value first. It is the product owner's responsibility to ensure delivery of those products that provide the highest level of business value first. Even an extremely valuable product may not be part of the first release if there are other products of even higher value that are sufficient for a first release. Risk and uncertainty are two important factors because the more uncertainty that exists, the riskier the project is. Therefore, it is important that riskier products in the prioritized product backlog are given higher priority. Products carrying a higher level of risk will also require risk mitigation actions. When these risk mitigation actions are prioritized against the backlog, the result is a risk-adjusted product backlog. Dealing with risks early in the project does not guarantee that the project will be successful, but it does enhance the team's ability to deal with risk. Next factor is dependencies. It is usually not possible to create a prioritized product backlog in which there are no dependencies between user stories. Functional requirements often depend on other functional and even non-functional requirements. These dependencies can impact how the user stories in the prioritized product backlog are prioritized. Two of the most common ways to resolve dependencies are to either split a single story into multiple parts or combine interdependent stories. Another important factor is estimates. High-level estimates for epics are also available in the prioritized product backlog. Now, what are the tools employed to carry out this process? First of all, we have the prioritized product backlog review meetings as the tool. The intent of the prioritized product backlog review meetings is to ensure that user stories and acceptance criteria are understood and are written properly by the product owner, so that they reflect the actual stakeholder or customer requirements and priorities. User stories are understood by everyone in the Scrum team, and that high-priority user stories are well refined so that the Scrum team can properly estimate and commit to such user stories. The prioritized product backlog review meetings also ensure that irrelevant user stories are removed and any approved change requests or identified risks are incorporated into the prioritized product backlog. Now that we have seen the list of inputs and tools being used, it is time to see the outputs created. Updated prioritized product backlog is the output generated. As we have already discussed it under tools, I'm going to skip ahead with the impression that you've understood it well. So, prioritized product backlog may be updated with new user stories, new change requests, new identified risks, updated user stories, or reprioritization of existing user stories. Thank you for watching this video of Scrum Master Certification course.